Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Katy Huff with Katy Huff Ministries. I am so excited to be here with you today to share with you an incredible woman, Dr. Laura Lajoie, who is here to share with you what has set her free. And this podcast, we are encouraging people to be, do, and have whatever God has created them to be, and to be set free from whatever is holding you back. Because God's got a plan, and we are grateful that it is good and right on time. So with that, I want to introduce you to the lovely Dr. Laura Lajoie, who joins us from Oregon. And I am just so grateful and thankful that you're here to share your story, Laura. I know people are going to just cleave to it and learn from it and be inspired and blessed. And so how would you like to start by saying who you are, what your background is, and what you feel you've been set free from?
Absolutely. Thank you, Katy. It's such a joy to be here, and what an honor. Well, I'm a chiropractor. I've been practicing for almost 30 years, and I'm married to the wonderful Mike Bishop, and we have three incredible children that are currently all three college students, which is kind of mind-blowing.
Yes.
And I live a life of joy. My last name is LaJoie. It means the joy, and that's what I try to get out of every single day. You asked, what have I been set free from? It's a complicated question, I think, for many of us. And for me, part of it was losing my dad at age 4. I was 6 months old when he was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, and he was given 6 months to live. And he decided that he was going to live for long enough for this little girl to remember him. And he lived for 4.5 years.
Wow.
My mom says I'm just like him. He was audacious and outgoing and never knew a stranger. And for any of you that know me, this is also true about me.
Absolutely.
But losing my dad at age 4 it left a huge hole in my life. And I was always searching for validation from the men in my life. My grandfather, thank goodness, was bold and strong and firm with me and helped me learn self-discipline and self-respect. I was gifted with a stepdad at age 12 and 2 wonderful stepbrothers. And so I feel blessed by that. But I was always, again, looking for validation from men because I was missing that big piece.
Yeah.
So over time, it became a challenge. It created the format for relationships for me. I often felt like, especially as a teenager, men were looking for physical love.
Right.
And I just wanted to get attention and feel like I was loved. And at the time, I really didn't know what that meant. Because my dad died at age 27, I was pretty reckless in my life up to that point. Always college bound, doctor bound since I was 8 years old. I had a mission and purpose in my life, but I also felt like there was that piece that was missing. So it was a struggle.
Wow. Yeah. So your sequence of events obviously started at 4 and then continued through your teenage years for looking for love in all the wrong places, is what I would say, like in the chapter in one of my chapters in my book.
Right.
Because I think a lot of times there's a lot of people that need to go through that, which is kind of a crazy lesson to learn, but hopefully we learn the lesson, which you have and I have, and we're grateful for that. And then obviously into your 20s, do you want to share what the sequence of events happened from when you were high school into your 20s to and what that was like for you?
Well, I mean, we could go back to age 4.
Okay.
I lost my dad. I ended up spending a lot of time with caregivers from ages 2 to 5 when my mom was spending an abundant amount of time at the hospital with my dad. On the weekends, my mom would be working, and so I was spending time with my grandparents. And, much like many people's stories, there was a friend of the family who was very kind to me, was always giving me gifts, making my favorite meals, asking me to keep secrets. And from the age of 5 to 11, I was groomed into what was ultimately full-blown child abuse.
Wow.
I didn't realize how wrong it was because we were friends and this was a secret and you can't tell anybody because, then our secret will be violated and our friendship will be over. And I was like, well, this guy's like, he's always taking me places and buying me things and my family loves him. He was like an uncle. And I ended up living with my grandparents for a couple of years, and when they moved to Oregon, he moved with them. Like that's how close he was to the
Wow.
family. They had absolutely no idea that this was happening, and he would come into my room at night or say things to me during the day or do things to me during the day when my grandmother was not home. And I mean, I remember vividly when I was 11 years old, there was a night that he told me he was coming into my room at night, and I hid. I hid. I hid where he couldn't find me, and he didn't find me, and he was angry, and he didn't speak to me the next day. But by that time, I was, 5'10", 150 pounds. I was taller than him. I was bigger than him in some ways. I was not stronger than him, but there was something in me that just knew that it was wrong, and I did not want that anymore. But I
Yeah.
wasn't going to sacrifice living with my grandparents either, because that was such a blessing in my life. And so I never told anybody. And it wasn't until I was 15 years old that, one of my cousins told her parents that something had happened, that he had offered to teach her the ways of being a woman because she was
Wow.
18.
Oh my gosh.
And she told her parents, and they told my mom, and my mom asked me if anything ever happened. And I never disclosed to her the full scope of what happened because I wanted to protect her, because I didn't want her to feel like she hadn't protected me.
Right.
But at that time, when I told her what happened, she told my grandparents, and they sent him away. They sent him to live in a men's home in another state, far away. I've never seen him again. I've never heard from him again. And what transpired with that story was, I realized that I had a responsibility in this. And I know as a child, I couldn't make it my fault, but I also had to realize that I was going to have to forgive him, and God says all over the Bible about,
Right.
you need to forgive so that it doesn't just eat away at your soul.
Right.
And I had to forgive him, and I legitimately have forgiven him, and I hope that he ends up in a safe and peaceful place, because he wasn't a bad man. He just did bad things, and he did bad things to me.
Right.
And
Exactly.
there's nowhere in the Bible that says that we should forget these things. And so part of where I've been set free is, I went from that experience into my teens. I always had a boyfriend, or three or four.
Yeah. Well, you're
And
beautiful.
oh, thank you. And I always felt like they wanted physical attention, and I would get the love I felt that I needed in
Yeah.
return,
Yeah.
or the attention. And so that was my whole life. Ultimately, I met an incredible man when I was 20, and we were together for 6 years, married for 2. So I call it my training marriage, because we never had any kids, but we had a dog. And he was an incredible man. But out of that relationship, I learned that he was codependent, and I was violently independent. Like, I would call it violently independent, because I would not allow myself to need anyone but
Wow.
my immediate family, my mother and my grandparents, my cousin and my aunt. And he always felt like I wasn't giving myself to him as a partner because I didn't need him. And I would say, I want you, I choose you, but I wouldn't allow myself to need him. And towards the end of our relationship, there was a situation where we were just playing. We were wrestling on the floor, and we were both, tough and competitive, and it got kind of rough, and I had a flashback. And I hadn't had anything like that happen in over 10
Yeah.
years.
Wow.
And I ended up crying and being very upset. It caused me to go into therapy, which I had kept saying, oh, I don't need this. Like, I've overcome it. I'm over it. But I really just realized that I had stuffed it
Wow. Yeah.
for many years.
Yeah.
And what came out of it was ultimately the demise of my marriage. Um, and I spent the next year really healing and learning what I needed in a partner. And now fast forward to 1995, I met Mike, and we were both very clear about what our needs were and the kind of partner we wanted to be. In 1997, we were married. In 1998, we had our first child. And, fast forward now over 25 years, we are in a marriage where we can both be independent and interdependent.
Mm.
And I never understood what that meant until I had a partner that wasn't jealous, wasn't putting me in a box, wasn't creating their expectations for me, but would actually really listen for what my expectations were for myself and for us, and then allowing us to live our relationship and our life through that.
Nice. Well, and with your sequence of events, I'm sure, as you've explained quite well, is there's times where you're like, well, I always ask people, have you seen God move in your life in a situation that you've gone through that you might want to share? Because I'm always telling people God never leaves us or forsakes us. He's always with us, even though it may not feel like it. But do you have something that you could share with him where you just knew that the hand of God was present in your situation?
A vivid image comes to me of standing with my grandmother at church when I was 10 years old and holding her hand and hearing her sing. And whenever I think about that, it reminds me of how much I am loved.
Yeah.
And I've always felt very close to God. I've always felt like the people that have gone before me, my dad, my stepdad, my grandfather, my grandma now, that I have these incredible angels that surround my life. And I never, ever, ever walk alone.
Absolutely.
Because, the face of God shines on me in the sunshine and blows my hair in the wind and is under my feet in the grass. Like I'm a very outdoorsy person. So anytime that I can touch nature, I feel that connection to God. And I have tried to live a life of kindness and joy. And I know that, we are designed to meet people where they are.
Right.
And not place our life experiences and our judgment on them.
Right.
And so the way that God moves through me every day is just the reminder that if I can show up and wear the face of God, then nothing can hurt me.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter where I am or whose agenda we're living in.
That's beautiful.
Going back to some of my life experience, like we've lived in the same house for 25 years this month. And we've raised our children on this corner, and I am a fierce mama bear. Like, do not mess with my children.
Yes.
And we've had situations where, boys have never been allowed upstairs in my house. Men have never been allowed to babysit, except for a couple of my husband's best friends when my children were little. And I literally told one of them, like, I love you. I know you're going to be here when the kids go to bed. They can change their own clothes. I have no expectations of you seeing them in the bathtub, seeing them naked. And if you ever hurt or touch one of my children in an inappropriate way, I will kill you.
Yeah.
And I meant it. And it wasn't that I didn't trust him or love him, but I mean, that part of me, like, I will protect them from everything that ever hurt me in my life.
Yeah.
But in that, I've also created these people that my children are fearless. They are resilient. They are powerful. They know they're loved. I mean, we have two family phrases. One of them is, whatever you think of me is none of my business. It's what I think. The other one is, things work out for us.
Yes.
And so we've been able to see through those hard times where life looks like something is bad happening to us or something is wrong that we didn't expect. And we're able to take that and know that God has a bigger plan than we do.
Oh, yeah.
And we have to trust that that thing didn't work out because there's something else even better.
Absolutely.
And we just have to trust. Like, implicitly trust.
Yes. Yes. Every day we need to make the decision that we're going to trust that we're where we're supposed to be. And to your point, I always say God's our protector and our provider. And so when things don't go the way we want them to, there's a reason for that. And I always say we need to pause, we need to pray, and we don't do anything until we have peace. And if there's no peace in that decision, it's because he's protecting us and he knows the beginning from the end. We don't. He knows the plans, right? And so to your point, I love the Ephesians 3:20, which is that he will do exceedingly abundantly above all that we could ever imagine. And I hang my hat on that because he is so faithful and he continually shows up and continues to walk with us.
Well, and I have a practice every morning. I mean, before my head comes off the pillow and my feet hit the floor, every morning I say, thank you, God, for the abundance that is mine. And please allow me to show up today as the best me today.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
And it just gives me that empowerment. Like, I don't have to be the best me ever. I don't have to be the best person in the universe. I just have to be the best version of me today.
Exactly.
And God can live and work through me in ways that I don't understand. And I think, I mean, when you start to listen to that voice within you,
yes,
you live with intention and you live with purpose and you trust the intuition. For instance, I was in Seattle last weekend with my daughter and 2 exchange students. And this man with a suitcase walked up to us as we were getting out of the car. And he said, could you spare some money to buy me a milkshake? Like, I'm legitimately looking for work. I've been out of work. I haven't eaten all day. And I said, I'd love to buy you a milkshake. In fact, why don't you come with us and we'll buy you a meal. We're happy to share with you. And my kids are looking at me like, you just invited a homeless man to dinner. I'm like, I didn't invite a homeless man. I met a man that needed dinner and I could help provide that. And so I think that when we're moved to do things like that, we don't shy away from it or judge it or, pause and go, oh my God, who's gonna judge me for spending $12 on a guy that I never will have another encounter with? That doesn't matter. You have to be able to listen to those moments. And I mean, I really got that from my grandmother. She was just the most generous person I've ever met. Literally, we would have strangers home for dinner, or anyone who was traveling through her town. If they were passing through and it happened to be mealtime, there was always enough. It didn't matter if it was 2 people or 10 people.
Wow.
And you give what you have because life isn't meant to be hoarded. It's meant to be shared.
Absolutely. It's interesting. Sometimes when we would go to my grandma's as well, there would be a plate set there and no one was there. And we would go, wait a minute, there's only 5 of us and you have a 6th plate. And he was just like, you never know who's going to show up. And there's always a plate at the table for whoever has come by and hasn't eaten. So it's a beautiful thing to be able to give because we've received and to be able to bless someone because you don't know when the next time that guy's going to have another meal and it might fortify him for the next day or who knows. So that's a beautiful walking, talking example of God's grace and God's love and his hand on you and your girls that are amazing women and have accomplished so much with you and Mike as the parents. How could they not, because of the example that both of you have given them, which is a beautiful thing to see. And so do you have maybe some advice to someone who may have gone through a similar thing or moving into where you are today? Obviously is your walking, talking example of being an overcomer and being able to put in place like the forgiveness, which is so important because so many people think that forgiveness sets that other person free when in fact it sets you free.
Right. I would say the most important advice I would give to people would be, 1, to look at the examples in your life where the kind of love in a romantic relationship, in a friendship, and even with family, like look at examples of where that shows up and decide what you want to exist in your life so that you know what you're looking for. It's kind of like going into the grocery store
Right.
without a shopping list. You end up with stuff in your cart that you really don't need or necessarily want. And that's what happens with relationships. If you don't know what you're looking for, how do you achieve the kind of intensity or capacity for those relationships
Right.
anyway? And the second would be to be willing to be afraid to move into relationships, even though the ones that are unknown. Be afraid and do it anyway.
Yeah.
Because fear is just false evidence appearing real.
Exactly.
And in order to move through some of the hardest times in your life, we can either fight, flee, or freeze. But there's another choice. And the other choice is to fail forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be able
Absolutely.
to move through those relationships and realize that, okay, well, I'm going to try this out. It feels good right now. Here's some red flags that I'm going to be aware of.
Yes.
When you meet those people that the first time that you go out to dinner and they're rude to the waiter or waitress, or they're, have road rage, or things that you're like, I don't know if this is going to be right.
Right.
Listen to that and know that you don't have to spend 10 years making yourself right that it's not right. You can spend 10 minutes and decide, you know what, it was really nice meeting you, I'm done. And at the same time, realize that, the reality of spending time with people that matter.
Right.
And knowing that the 5 to 10 people that you spend the most time with are a reflection of your values. If there's people that you're spending time with that don't have the same values, you can move on respectfully without having to stay in that relationship, and continue to seek those things that is what you really desire in life, because there's no right answer. It's really how are you feeling right in the moment,
Right.
and what are you committed to living for the rest of your life.
Right. And you know what I find through a lot of the women and even men that have been on my podcast is that we don't feel that we are worthy to have nothing but the best a lot of times. And so we settle. And when you settle, obviously it's not in your best interest, because God's plan is to do exceedingly abundantly above. So I even look at myself as an example. When I was on the couch one time doing a business coaching call, and I was telling him about one of my situations where I was betrayed. And we were not on the same page in our faith. We were not on the same page in a number of things, but you know how we are, Laura. He was handsome. He was successful. He bought me flowers. He was romantic. This is a guy that I was engaged to and I was going to marry. And this bold coach said to me, he may have betrayed you, but you betrayed yourself on the first date when you asked him what his faith was, and he was not a Christian, and you're a Christian woman. I'll tell you what, that was the Holy Spirit 2x4. It hit me in the forehead. Yeah. I was just like, done. And I all of a sudden was able to heal, because I kept holding on, praying that he would come to know Jesus and know God. And my husband, who God bless him is a pastor, one of his messages is, Katy, we call that missionary dating, where you're on a mission to save the person when it's not your job. I was like, boy, is that
with friendships too.
What's that?
We do that with friendships.
Yes.
And with family.
Yes.
And yeah. And we need to stay faithful to our own mission and purpose in life. And I think that there aren't enough people on the planet that really look at that. Like, what do I stand for?
Right.
And how am I pursuing my purpose and my vision for my life and the people that are the most important in it? Because we're trying to please everybody else.
Right. And just as important as having that partner that is going to celebrate who you are and not try to change who you are to fit their mantra or their desires. So awesome stuff. So is there anything else you want to share with people about how you have just been an amazing example of how to overcome and to be set free, giving forgiveness to yourself and to that other person, I mean, you've had quite the life, and you are a walking, talking example as you started of what joy looks like. You radiate that, which is a beautiful thing to see.
Thank you. Well, I would say, a lot of people want to look at the glass half full or flat glass empty. And I would say that, in God's love, the glass is overflowing.
Yes.
And we have an opportunity to live out loud, fully self-expressed. And I mean, what if each one of you took a risk today to step outside your comfort zone and do something that was meaningful, that was going to not only matter to you, but to the next person that you touch, and be unafraid and be unapologetic. Because, I mean, there's a difference between happiness and joy, right? Happiness is something that you can create out of an activity or a relationship or a movement, but joy is something that is inside of you. It's a feeling. And I think that there's a lot of people that are, afraid of fully self-expressing themselves because of the impression that they think other people are going to have. But I would challenge each and every one of you to do something that's going to bring you joy today, and do it unapologetically, and see how you feel at the end of the day. If you don't have more lightness and more gratitude and more grace.
Amen. Well, this has been an amazing interview with Dr. Laura Lajoie, who is full of joy. And I am thrilled that you were here to listen to this episode of Setting Yourself Free. And until next time, please go to katy-huff.com. That's my website. Again, it's katy-huff.com to get more information about books, coaching, women's retreats, courses. And of course, what I really encourage you to do is go to YouTube, hit that button under Katy Huff Ministries and subscribe so you can hear all these amazing stories that you will hear, like Dr. Laura Lajoie. And follow us on Spotify, Apple, Rumble, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We are out there wanting to inspire and encourage you to be, do, and have all that you were created to be. And I just thank you once again for listening to Katy Huff Ministries and Dr. Laura Lajoie. God bless you. Thank you for sharing your heart and inspiring and encouraging people to be and do and have all the joy that they have been created to have.